It hasn't even been 15 days into 2026, and the rules-based international order isn't just shaking, it's screaming. With the U.S. snatching President Maduro from Venezuela and eyeing Iran next, the world feels like it's on a collision course with chaos. But while the headlines scream war, the real game is being played on the ice. Is Donald Trump about to dismantle NATO for a piece of frozen land? Over the last few days, the Trump administration has drastically escalated its rhetoric regarding Greenland, moving from diplomatic pressure to blatant threats of military action. While the world has grown accustomed to U.S. interventionism in Venezuela or Iran, turning that aggression toward a NATO ally feels like a glitch in the geopolitical matrix. Trump's justification is a carbon copy of the Kremlin's rhetoric. He claims that total control of Greenland is a matter of survival for U.S. national security, a preemptive strike to keep Russia and China at bay. The irony is staggering. For years, Vladimir Putin used this exact logic to justify his actions in Ukraine, arguing that it must remain in Russia's orbit to keep NATO away from Moscow's doorstep. Now, the United States is abandoning the very principles of sovereignty it once championed, choosing to imitate the expansionist tactics of its greatest rivals. To give this power grab a veneer of legitimacy, Trump is seeking constitutional cover. But here is the reality. Greenland is an integral part of the Kingdom of Denmark. While it enjoys broad autonomy and manages its own internal affairs, Copenhagen still holds the keys to its defense and foreign policy. Despite relentless pressure from Washington, the Greenlandic government has been unwavering. They view America as a vital ally, but certainly not as a landlord. The Prime Minister of Greenland has been blunt. They would choose Denmark over the U.S. any day of the week. Denmark's message to Trump remains unchanged. Greenland is not for sale. In response, Donald Trump is now questioning the very legitimacy of Danish sovereignty. His argument? A bizarre historical claim that because Europeans arrived by boat centuries ago, the land belongs to whoever has the biggest boat today. It's a twisted logic that echoes the dark history of North America itself. Native Americans who lived on their lands for millennia saw their world erased by European guns and ships. Trump seems to be invoking that same colonial mindset. That might makes right. But Denmark has drawn a line in the melting ice. They have made it clear that they will not hand over Greenland, not willingly and certainly not peacefully. If Trump wants the world's largest island, he will have to take it by force. Now, the problem for Trump is that Greenland is not part of South America when he decided to reverse power there. Looted. Denmark is then part of NATO. If there is an attack on its territory, that is Greenland, then all the countries of NATO will have to come to the war to save it by rule by law. But the problem is that America is also a member of NATO. So technologically, if the U.S. uses the military on Greenland, then there will be an internal war or civil war inside NATO, from which essentially NATO will end. The reason for the collapse of the alliance that West created to escape the USSR could become America today, the country that has remained a net security provider for NATO for decades. Today, he looks ready to mix it in clay. That is why, in view of the deteriorating situation, all leaders of Europe are advising Trump to work with sovereignty, territorial integrity, international borders in mind. But Trump is currently holding Greenland stubbornly, and he is not ready to listen to anyone. This week, Vice President J.D. Vance is scheduled to meet with leaders from Denmark and Greenland in Washington. The big question is, what will come of it? Will these leaders be burned by the White House, much like we saw with Zelensky? Some suggest this is all just a distraction, a way to pull the public's eyes away from the Epstein files. But even if it is a smokescreen, betraying your own allies for a distraction is a dangerous game. To understand why this is happening, we need to look at the map and the history. Size versus population. Greenland is the largest island in the world. It is massive, big enough to fit 6 Germanys inside it. Yet despite its vast size, it is home to only about 56,000 people. A geopolitical crossroads. Because of its location, Greenland constantly finds itself trapped in great power politics. It sits right between the U.S. and Europe. To the north, the Arctic Ocean, which is melting rapidly. To the south, the Atlantic Ocean, the main artery for trade between America and Europe. The Monroe Doctrine. Geographically, Greenland is much closer to North America than to Europe. This is why the Trump administration is invoking the Monroe Doctrine, a policy that essentially claims the Western Hemisphere as America's sphere of influence. We've explained this doctrine in detail before, but in short, Trump believes that if it's in our backyard, it should be under our control. Regardless of what America claims today, Greenland's political and cultural heart has belonged to Europe for centuries. Denmark colonized the island about 300 years ago and has maintained its rule ever since. In the modern era, specifically in 1953, Greenland officially became a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Since 1979, however, Greenland has been steadily moving away from Danish control towards self-rule. Today it has its own parliament, its own local laws, and its own law enforcement. The Danish government in Copenhagen now primarily handles only the big-picture issues, like foreign policy and national security. This is where the story gets complicated. While Greenland and Denmark share a long history, their relationship isn't perfect. It's a close bond, yes, but one shadowed by the past. The truth is, Denmark has historically wronged the Greenlandic people, leaving behind scars that still affect their relationship today. These wrongs include dark chapters like forced contraception, programs that removed young children from the island, and the systematic imposition of Danish culture over native traditions. Today, Denmark acknowledges these as deep failures, and the Danish government has issued official apologies. Even now, Denmark continues to support Greenland with significant financial aid. Yet, despite this support, the desire for full independence remains strong among most Greenlanders. They want to stand on their own. But, and this is the crucial point, if they have to choose between Denmark and any other foreign power, they choose Denmark every time. This raises the obvious question: if Greenlanders want to maintain their bond with Denmark, why is the U.S. trying to force itself into the middle of this relationship? Why be the third wheel nobody asked for? Looking at the chaos surrounding Greenland today, it's hard not to see it as the result of a presidential whim. It feels as though Donald Trump, perhaps emboldened by power, is simply determined to swallow Greenland, regardless of what the people living there actually want. That is why whenever they see a domestic challenge like the Estin file, sometimes Venezuela, sometimes Iran, sometimes Greenland go on it to distract people. Well, distraction is a huge reason in this case. But it must also be believed that Trump's interest in Greenland is a little more than distraction. The story is deeper than this, because even before Donald Trump, two American administrations have tried to buy Greenland. Woodrow Wilson at the time of World War I and Harry Truman at the time of the Second World War is not a new thing for America to buy this territory either. From Louisiana to Alaska, if you go through American history, you will find many incidents where the United States has not invaded new territories as needed. The same model has been adopted in the last century with Greenland already. At the time of the Second World War, Nazi Germany occupied mainland Denmark. Therefore, for the protection of Greenland, the United States had occupied Greenland throughout the wartime so that the territory would not fall to the hands of Nazi Germany. The U.S. established military and radio stations there. After the war ended, the U.S. returned the rest of the territory to Denmark, but the American forces have been permanently stationed in Greenland ever since. This is followed by the signing of a defense agreement between the U.S. and Denmark in 1951. This long-standing agreement gives the U.S. the right to build and maintain military bases on the island, which is why the American presence at Pacific Space Base, formerly known as Thule, remains intact today. So, if the U.S. already has a military foothold there, why the sudden pressure for a total takeover? The answer lies beneath the surface. For centuries, more than 80% of Greenland has been locked under a thick layer of ice, hidden away from the rest of the world. But as global warming thaws the Arctic, that ice is thinning rapidly. This melting ice is changing everything. First, it makes it much easier to reach the vast mineral wealth hidden deep underground. Second, it is opening up brand new shipping lanes. Places that were once completely inaccessible to ships are now becoming viable for commercial activity. As the polar ice caps recede, New routes like the Northeast Passage and the Transpolar Sea Route are emerging. These paths through the central Arctic could transform global trade, turning what was once a frozen wasteland into one of the busiest and most valuable corridors on the planet. The idea is simple. The traditional route between Asia and Europe goes through the Suez Canal. The Arctic Sea route can become his alternative. This northern route will not only save weeks, but also save fuel cost. Suez Canal's heady fee price for ships. This means saving trillions of dollars every year. As the commercial value of Arctic increases, so will the effort to gain control over it. Only 5 countries have exclusive control over the Arctic due to active global treaties. They are the U.S., Canada, Greenland, Norway, and Russia. It means 4 countries belong to NATO and 1 to Russia. Greenland is a junction point of the North Atlantic and Arctic from which the movement of the entire ocean can be monitored. Greenland, Iceland, UK Gap, IUK, Gap is considered a critical naval choke point. These choke points connect the Arctic to the Atlantic and are very much essential for tracking submarine movements. This geographic gap is crucial for monitoring Russian submarines and maintaining NATO's defensive positions. But the story of Greenland isn't just about strategic locations, shipping lanes, and naval security. The real reason the island is at the center of this global tug-of-war is its vast natural resources. Hidden beneath the ice are massive reserves of oil, gas, gold, and most importantly, rare earth minerals. As the ice melts, extracting these resources commercially becomes more viable every day. These rare earth elements are the lifeblood of America's big tech industry. Everything from telecommunications and smartphones to advanced microchips, electric vehicles, EVs, and high-end military hardware depends on them. For years, China has dominated the rare earth race, currently controlling the majority of the global supply. The U.S. has been searching for an alternative for a long time. Just as we saw attempts to secure interests in Ukraine last year, we now see a similar focus shifting toward Greenland. However, taking control of Greenland wouldn't immediately solve the supply problem. The island's mining sector is still largely unexplored. The environment remains incredibly harsh, infrastructure is almost non-existent, and the processing of these minerals presents a massive technical challenge. Even with total control, it would take years, if not decades, to build a fully functioning industry in such a remote part of the world. The cost will be staggering, billions if not trillions of dollars. Beyond the money, the environmental risks and the potential for ecological damage are immense. But if this gamble pays off, the returns from Greenland will be legendary. America's big tech giants are well aware of this. Even before Trump's latest push, U.S. billionaires had already begun pouring money into mineral exploration on the island. Figures like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Peter Thiel are already there, committing massive capital to extraction projects. This raises a suspicious question about the timing. Are these billionaires the ones actually driving the agenda? It often looks like Trump is simply doing the dirty work of occupation to serve their interests. Because Trump is a businessman himself, these theories are gaining serious traction in America. But the consensus is that this story won't end with Greenland. If the U.S. moves forward with a forced takeover, the security of the entire Western world will be at stake. It would threaten the very existence of NATO. And the core idea behind NATO is actually very simple. Collective defense is an alliance where members guarantee each other. You believe the bond of blood, where he has said that if there is an attack on a country, then everyone will resign together. But there is no provision inside the alliance if the fight breaks out. That is why Denmark has repeatedly made it clear that if the U.S. advances on Greenland, tries to invade Greenland, then the direct NATO will end. Now, when the matching arrangements start to weaken or end, people will find night options. Reasonable thing. Now, if the U.S. starts cheating its Lee, then the day is not far away if Europe starts to deal with Russia or China. Today, at least these people believe in America because Brother America is a net security provider. The most money gives the most arms America. But if the U.S. does all these things, then China will probably become a net security provider, and no matter what happens, the same thing will happen ultimately, which the U.S. does not want. which the U.S. fears that its rivals will penetrate the sphere of influence of the U.S. Russia and at least China's growing influence in Europe is no longer a far-fetched idea. With this, any method of attack on Greenland will be a signal to Russia and China that now the era of might is right in the world is back again. That is why everyone should mark their own territory. If you want to expand, expand. No one will come to save. Because America itself is dragging the world back to a time where international borders do not matter. If America wants Greenland, it will take it. If Russia wants Ukraine, it will go to Russia. China wants Taiwan. India wants parts. There will be no stopping. There will be a tough choice for emerging powers like India. Either they ignore all these things happening in the world, quietly focus on their economic development. Either, due to global insecurity, spend even more money on defense and defense. There may also be a middle option that we focus on our capacity building and whether it is in defense or in economy. But the problem is that the Modi government focuses more on the opposition, on Nehru, on the media, on Muslims, and that's why development is not happening. Today the situation is such that we draw large GDP numbers, but no one believes in it. I still say there is one last chance to improve.